My name is Edgin, and I live in northern Minnesota. And I have a passion for the transformative powers of koji. So the amazing thing about koji is that it creates enzymes, and with those enzymes you can transform a huge array of foods into even more different foods. So traditionally, koji has been used for making miso, for making mirin, for making shoyu, black vinegar, rice wine vinegar, amazake, sake, etc. So I am a gardener, I am a forager, I wild harvest foods. So I grew up in southern Illinois, and there I grew up doing all of these things. And as I got older, when I got in my 20s, I had great interest in utilizing those foods that I harvested and that I was growing and expanding the ways in which I could use those. So I started off with things like sauerkraut and kimchi and things like that were fairly easy to do. But I wanted to take that farther, and the way to do that was utilizing koji. So I had interest in making shoyu, particularly miso and mirin, things like this. So in northern Minnesota, as an example, there is wild rice that grows here. And so it's an easy jump to think, well, what would I use wild rice for? In what ways would I use it besides just cooking wild rice? So in what ways could I transform this into various condiments or additions to food? So the great thing with koji is its ability to create umami by breaking down proteins and carbohydrates. So proteolytic enzymes and enzymes for breaking down carbohydrates that can take all these complex foods and break them down into shorter chains. And in the process, flavor is created. So I have interest in doing this and have batches of utilizing pecans after being pressed for oil, using the leftover carbs and proteins for using for making shoyu. And there's a really wide array of things that can be done to broaden one's diet utilizing koji. So I'm taking something that is traditional and keeping the traditional inspiration, and then applying it to the foods that I have available here. And so I really needed koji itself in order to create all the ingredients that I wanted to create. So my first step then was learning more about koji. So I had seen reference to it for some food fermentation when I was doing research. So most of my research early on was done on the internet, and then quite a bit of it was done through a book once I found it called the Book of Miso. So I just read everything that I could, and then I tried it. And the first batches, I had a lot of problems, so I looked into it more. So one thing that traditionally was done, especially at home and in miso factories as well, so the miso factories, they had koji trays that were set up, and once the self-heat began later on in the period of making koji, the koji went into trays, and it had been a bigger table with sidewalls to get it to that point. So and you need to incubate it and keep the temperature and humidity steady. And so wood was heavily utilized in that process, and that makes sense because wood has insulative properties, and also it has absorptive properties. So one important thing is if there's excess moisture that is in the substrate you're using to grow on, whether that's rice or soybeans, it can pull out any of the excess moisture. So with trying to troubleshoot, Aspergillus oryzae is a mold, and so what things do molds prefer? Well, molds prefer moisture but not standing water, and they prefer particular temperatures, with koji itself anywhere from the high 80s to high 90s Fahrenheit, and prefers a high humidity, and that can depend what humidity level depending on what specific koji strain you have, but I generally go for about 80-85% humidity. So what I've done is made koji moro that is a cabinet. It looks like a standalone cabinet in a kitchen, and then trays to go with that. So the construction is inspired by Japanese joinery, and utilizing cedar, which was seemingly cedar and cypress was mostly what was used with koji production and the things you use koji with, such as the vats used for making shoyu and miso and mirin. And so I utilize cedar and construction methods that deal well with temperature and humidity changes because of the moro, the incubation chamber, holding 85 degrees or 88 degrees and 85% humidity for days at a time, and then being turned off and going to the ambient temperature of one's house and the humidity level of one's house. So there's a lot of movement potential there. And so I mill the wood, I process the wood in a way that the wood grain runs so that it can deal with all of those changes. So there's no condensation on the walls because with maintaining the high humidity, the wood absorbs any excess moisture, and the trays themselves also absorb moisture. So then two of those also insulate against the outside and keep the temperature steady, along with a heater and humidifier and controls they have for maintaining that. So I began making those things for myself, and eventually I found others that were also interested in koji and all of the different things that there's potential to make with koji. So I began selling those as well, and so that other people can also utilize these things that I have been using. And yeah, so there's a lot of things that I've worked on making myself. So I've made gallons and gallons of mirin, of shoyu, of miso, and currently a lot of my stuff is in deep storage due to the process of moving. But I have some things available that I have to pull off of for right now. So I have a black bean miso and a garbanzo bean miso. So utilizing rice koji with beans. And then this is similar to the fish sauce in one region of Japan that utilizes koji. And in this case, it's actually white rice koji, but it's the koji that creates citric acid. So I combine that with chicken. And so this is actually similar to fish sauce, but utilizing chicken. And I also have fish sauces utilizing fish. Anchovies is a common fish used for fish sauce in various parts of Asia. I use smelt, which are a similar sized fish. And yeah, so those are all, these are some of the things that I have right now that are available to show you currently. And so my interest in this has been huge, but one thing is I've only been able to research it on the internet and research it through books. And I'd really love the chance to go to Japan and spend time with people who make some of the stuff that I make, particularly with koji, shoyu. I'd like to see some mirin places, visit woodworkers. So in the back here, there's some of my coopered vessels that I've made utilizing cedar. I don't have the bamboo available that was typically used in Japan with the coopered vessels, particularly for shoyu and things where there's potential expansion in the vessel and that the bamboo can grow with it. So I mostly utilize copper for that. And so there's some places there that are still utilizing cedar vats. It fell off pretty hard after World War II. There are places still utilizing cedar vats and a lot of places still using koji trays. So I'd really love to see that, and thank you for your time.